The Constitution at its heart is about limiting government power. If courts don't do their job and enforce the Constitution, then those limits are meaningless. That role for the courts is at the heart of judicial engagement.
Judicial engagement is judges actually judging. It's when judges require in constitutional cases that the government come into court and present some evidence that there's actually a problem that needs to be addressed and that the regulation that's being challenged really will address that problem.
The Center for Judicial Engagement is a program within the Institute for Justice that carries on our mission of seeking to achieve constitutional protection for the liberties that all Americans ought to enjoy.
At no time in American history have people been more dissatisfied with government than they are now. And we believe the reason for that is because there's more government right now than the Constitution permits. If we had an engaged judiciary, a properly engaged judiciary, we'd have a lot less government.
Today, what has happened is that you either have people who say there's no role for the courts, that are restraint advocates, or you have those who say anything they don't like or anything where the courts are involved in striking down legislative or executive authority, regardless of the reason oftentimes, that's activism and inherently illegitimate. Our point is the debate should be looking at what is the really legitimate role of courts, that there is in fact a legitimate role of courts, and that that role is recognized by the vast majority of this country's history when the courts looked at the Constitution, looked at the power authorized there, and determined whether or not the state or federal government exercising that power had the authority to do so. Judicial engagement, for instance, would be a situation that we had in the Craig Miles case. In this instance, the state of Tennessee had a licensing law that required anyone who sold caskets to be a licensed funeral director. There was no public health and safety rationale for that. There was no real viable consumer protection rationale for that. All that was proven at trial. When the Court of Appeals, the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, looked at what went on, it said the licensing law that is in place is a very limited purpose. That purpose is protectionist. It has no other purpose. We're looking truly at what's happening here. And when we do that, we see this as an invalid exercise of government power.
The Center for Judicial Engagement will educate people about the importance of a truly engaged judiciary and explain why it is so important for judges to enforce the Constitution to limit the size and scope of government. Unfortunately, too often, they're not doing that today.
We will be at this really for as long as the Institute for Justice exists, because liberty will always be under assault. The propensity of government is always to seek to expand beyond its legitimate boundaries, and therefore we will always be advocating that courts continue to be engaged, continue to enforce the Constitution, and continue to restore the proper limits on government authority.
The Constitution is a bulwark of liberty. It is a charter of liberty against overreaching government. That's how it was written, that's how it was understood at the time, and that's how judges are supposed to be enforcing it. They don't do that very often today, but we're going to change that.